Jake Morrison opened his eyes to darkness and the smell of burning metal. His head hurt badly, and his body felt heavy against the cold metal floor. Red emergency lights blinked on and off around him, making scary shadows on the walls. He tried to remember what happened. The attack came so fast. One moment he was working on his ship, the Meridian, fixing a broken engine part. The next moment, alien ships appeared from nowhere and started shooting. The captain ordered everyone to the escape pods. Jake barely made it to his pod before the ship exploded. Now he was somewhere else. Somewhere very different. Jake slowly got up and looked around. He was in a large room with curved walls and a high ceiling. The air tasted strange, but he could breathe. Strange symbols glowed softly on the walls, written in a language he had never seen before. The floor under his feet was smooth and warm, like it was alive. His escape pod sat behind him, broken and smoking. The life support system was dead. If he had stayed inside much longer, he would have died. But where was he now? Jake walked to what looked like a window. When he looked outside, his mouth fell open. He was inside a huge ring-shaped structure floating in space. The ring was so big he could not see the other side. Stars twinkled in the darkness beyond, and a red sun glowed. In the distance, "This is impossible," he said to himself. No one built things this big. Not humans, not any of the alien races he knew about. Jake found a door, and it opened when he walked near it. The hallway beyond was just as strange as the first room. The walls curved up and over his head, and soft lights followed him as he walked. Everything was quiet except for a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He walked for what felt like hours. The station was massive beyond belief. Some rooms were filled with machines he could not understand. Others had growing things that looked like plants, but moved when he got close. One room had a ceiling that showed the stars outside, as if their roof was no roof at all. Jake was getting hungry and thirsty. He had no food or water, and he did not know if anything on this station was safe to eat or drink. But then he found a room that was different from the others. This room had machines that looked almost familiar. Not human machines, but built for the same purposes. There were work tables and tools. Screens showed moving pictures and numbers. It looked like an engineering workshop, just like the ones Jake had worked in his whole life. He walked up to one of the screens. The symbols on it made no sense, but the pictures did. They showed the station from outside, with lines and numbers that looked like engineering drawings. Jake had seen drawings like this before when he worked on space stations and ships. "You're showing me how you work," he said to the screen. "But I don't understand your language." The screen flickered and changed. The symbols became simpler. Some looked almost like human numbers. Jake reached out and touched the screen. It felt warm under his fingers. Suddenly, more screens came to life around the room. They showed different parts of the station. Jake could see that many systems were broken or working poorly. The red emergency lights he saw earlier were warnings. This giant station was slowly dying, but it was also trying to fix itself. Jake watched the screens for a long time. He began to see patterns in the symbols and numbers. Whoever built this station thought like engineers. They built things that could repair themselves, but the repairs were not working anymore. "You need help," Jake said to the room, "and I need a place to live. Maybe we can help each other." As if it heard him, one of the screens showed a new picture. It was a map of the station with a glowing dot that showed where Jake was standing. Other dots showed where he could find food, water, and a place to sleep. Jake smiled for the first time since waking up. Maybe he was not going to die here after all. He followed the map to a room with a machine that made water. The water tasted clean and good. Another machine made something that looked like small gray cubes. Jake was very hungry, so he tried one. It tasted like nothing, but it filled his stomach and made him feel stronger. The map led him to a room with something that looked like a bed, but it was too big for a human. Jake found some soft material and made a place to sleep on the floor. As he lay down, he thought about what had happened to him. The aliens who attacked his ship were from the Hegemony Alliance. They ruled a large part of the galaxy and thought humans were weak and stupid. They had destroyed human colonies before, and they had killed his friends on the Meridian. They left him here to die, thinking he was too weak to survive. They were wrong. Jake had been fixing things his whole life. Engines, computers, life support systems, anything that was broken. His father had been an engineer, and his grandfather, too. They taught him that every problem had a solution if you looked hard enough and never gave up. This station was just a very big, very complicated machine, and machines could be fixed. Over the next few days, Jake explored more of the station. He found rooms full of strange devices and materials. He found areas where the walls and floors were growing like living things, repairing damage and building new structures. He found workshops with tools that seemed to know what he wanted to do before he touched them. Most importantly, he found the central core of the station. The core was a huge room at the center of the ring. In the middle was a tall tower made of crystal and metal that reached from floor to ceiling. Light moved through it like water, and it hummed with power. Screens and control panels surrounded it in circles. When Jake walked into the room, everything went quiet. Then a voice spoke to him, not in words, but in mathematical equations that appeared on the screens around him. Jake was good at math, so he understood some of it. The voice was asking who he was, and why he was there. Jake walked up to the main control panel. He put his hands on it and felt it warm under his touch. The equations on the screens changed. Jake realized the station was learning about him by touching him. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said out loud. "I'm an engineer from Earth. My ship was destroyed, and I was left here to die. But I don't want to die. I want to live, and I want to help you live too." The equations stopped flowing. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then new symbols appeared on the screens. They were simpler, more like pictures than math. Jake saw images of the station when it was new and bright. He saw the beings who built it working together, creating something beautiful and powerful. Then he saw what happened to them. War came to this part of space. The builders were destroyed by the same aliens who had attacked Jake's ship. The Hegemony Alliance had been killing and conquering for hundreds of years. But before they died, the builders left their greatest creation behind. This station was their gift to whoever was smart enough and brave enough to use it. It was waiting for someone who could understand its purpose and help it grow. The voice spoke again, but this time Jake understood it perfectly. It was not speaking in math anymore, but in feelings and ideas that went straight into his mind. "Welcome, Jake Morrison," the station said. "I have been waiting for you for a very long time." 6 months had passed since Jake first spoke with the station's mind. He now called it Nexus because it connected so many different systems together. Every day, Jake learned something new about how the station worked that the builders had been called the architects, and they were the best engineers Jake had ever heard of. They did not just build machines. They built machines that could think, learn, and grow. The station was alive in a way that normal machines were not. Jake spent his mornings in the workshops, learning to use tools that seemed to read his thoughts. When he wanted to cut metal, the tools would heat up and shape themselves into cutters. When he needed to weld pieces together, they would become welders. The tools learned what he needed almost before he knew it himself. In the afternoons, he worked on fixing the station's main systems. The power grid was his first big project. Many of the connections had broken over the years, and whole sections of the station were dark and cold. Jake found that the architect technology was different from human technology. Human machines did what they were told to do. Architect machines tried to understand what you wanted them to do. They learned from watching Jake work and began to help him in ways he did not expect. Jake was trying to reach a broken power line high above his head. The floor grew upward to make stairs. When he needed to carry heavy equipment, walls would grow handles and wheels. The station was changing itself to help him fix it. One day, while working in a dark section of the station, Jake heard a sound he had not heard in months. Footsteps, but they were not human footsteps. They clicked and scraped against the metal. Jake grabbed a tool that could be used as a weapon and went to investigate. In the main corridor, he found a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked like it was made of living crystal, about as tall as Jake, but much thinner. Its body caught the light and threw it back in beautiful colors. The creature saw Jake and stopped walking. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then the creature made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Hello," Jake said carefully. "I'm Jake. Who are you?" The creature's crystals flashed with different colors. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded like music. "I am ZYX4419. I was hoping I would find someone here." "You can speak my language?" "I learned it from your station's computer," Zix said. "I have been listening to your communications with the station mind. You call it Nexus, yes?" Jake nodded. "How long have you been here?" 3 days. "I came in a small ship, but it was damaged in a fight with hegemony ships. They left me for dead, just like they left you." Jake felt a chill run down his back. "The hegemony attacked you too?" "Yes. My people tried to make peace with them, but they said we were too dangerous to live. They destroyed my whole world last year. I am one of the few who escaped." Jake looked at this strange crystal being and felt something he had not felt. In months, he was not alone anymore. "Come on," Jake said. "Let me show you around. Maybe you can help me fix this place." Zix turned out to be very good at understanding the architect technology. While Jake was best at working with machines and power systems, Zix could understand the biological parts of the station. The growing walls and living computers made sense to Zix in ways they did not to Jake. Together, they made much faster progress than Jake had made alone. They brought power back to 3 more sections of the station. They fixed the air recycling systems so the air smelled fresh and clean. They even got the food machines working well enough to make meals that actually had flavor. But the most important discovery came when they found the station's library. The library was a vast room filled with crystal towers that stored information. When Jake and Zix approached the towers, they lit up and began showing images in the air above them. The images showed the history of dozens of different alien civilizations. "This is incredible," Jake said, watching a hologram of a city built inside a gas giant. "They saved the knowledge of every race they met." "Not just knowledge," Zix said, touching one of the crystals. "Look at this." The crystal Zix touched showed images of the architects themselves. They looked somewhat like humans, but taller and thinner, with large eyes and long fingers. But in the later images, they looked different, less solid, more like beings made of light than flesh. "They evolved beyond physical bodies," Zix explained. "My people have legends about such things. The architects learned how to become pure thought and energy. But they left all this behind," Jake said, gesturing at the station around them. "Why?" Nexus answered them both, speaking through the library speakers. "They left it for those who would come after. They knew that other young races would need help to survive and grow. This station is a test and a gift." "A test?" Jake asked. "To see if a race is wise enough to use the architect's knowledge without destroying themselves or others. To see if they can learn to work together instead of fighting." Jake looked at Zix, and Zix looked back at him. A human and an alien, from opposite sides of the galaxy, working together to bring a dead station back to life. Maybe they were already passing the test. Over the following weeks, Jake and Zix discovered more wonders in the station. They found workshops that could build almost anything if you could describe what you wanted. They found gardens where food grew in ways that cleaned the air and provided light. They found communication arrays that could reach across the galaxy. Most amazing of all, they found that the station could move. The discovery happened by accident. Jake was working on what he thought was a broken stabilizer when suddenly the whole station shuddered. Through the windows, Jake could see that the stars were moving. "Nexus!" Jake called out. "What's happening?" "You have activated the mobility systems," Nexus replied calmly. "Did you not mean to do so?" "I had no idea this place could move. The architects built the station to travel between star systems. It can go anywhere in the galaxy, though the journey takes time." Jake and Zix rushed to the control room in the station's core. The screens there now showed star maps and navigation charts. Jake could see their current location and dozens of possible destinations. "We could go anywhere," Zix said in wonder. "We could visit other civilizations, other worlds. Or we could find others like us," Jake added. "Other refugees. Other people? The hegemony has hurt." That night, as Jake lay in his bed, he thought about the possibilities. For months, he had focused on just surviving and fixing the station. But now he was starting to think bigger. The station was not just a place to live. It was a tool that could help others. The next morning, Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Nexus," he said, standing in the control room. "I want to send a message." "To whom?" "To anyone who is listening. Anyone who needs help. Anyone who is running from the hegemony." Zix joined him at the control panel. "What kind of message?" Jake thought for a moment, then began to speak. Nexus recorded his words and prepared to broadcast them across the galaxy. "This is Jake Morrison, calling from the Deep Space Station Nexus 7. If you are hearing this message, you are probably in trouble. Maybe your home was destroyed. Maybe you are hiding from those who want to hurt you. Maybe you think you have nowhere to go. You do have somewhere to go. This station is big enough for thousands of people. We have food, water, air, and safety. We have workshops where you can build whatever you need. We have libraries full of knowledge from across the galaxy. Most importantly, we have hope. It does not matter what species you are or where you come from. It does not matter if you are human or alien, young or old, strong or weak. If you need help, we will help you. If you need a home, we will give you one. All we ask in return is that you help others the same way. Broadcast this message to anyone you think needs to hear it. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to live in peace if we choose to work together instead of fighting. This is Jake Morrison, signing off. We'll leave a light on for you." Nexus sent the message racing across space at faster than light speed. It would reach the nearest inhabited systems in days and spread from there. Jake had no idea how many people would hear it or if anyone would come. But 3 weeks later, he got his answer. A small ship appeared on the station's sensors, approaching slowly and sending peaceful signals. Jake and Zix watched nervously as it docked with one of the station's bays. The door opened and 5 beings stepped out. 3 were human, 1 was from Zix's people, and 1 was from a species Jake had never seen before. They all looked scared and tired, but their eyes were full of hope. "We heard your message," said one of the humans, a woman named Amy. "We've been running for 2 years since the hegemony destroyed our colony. Is it really true? Is this place safe?" Jake smiled and stepped forward. "Welcome to Nexus 7, he said. "Yes, it's safe. And yes, it's your home now, if you want it to be." As he showed the newcomers around the station, Jake realized that everything was about to change. He was no longer just a survivor trying to fix a broken station. He was becoming something he had never expected to be. He was becoming a leader. 2 years had passed since Jake sent his first message across the galaxy. What started with 5 refugees had grown into something amazing. Over 10,000 beings from 17 different species, now called Nexus 7 Home. Jake stood on the observation deck, looking out at the station's transformed landscape. Where once there had been empty corridors and dark rooms, now there were gardens, workshops, schools, and homes. The station had grown to accommodate everyone, adding new sections and levels as needed. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice. Behind him, Jake turned to see Dr. Lisa Grant, one of the first human refugees to arrive. She had become his closest advisor and friend over the past 2 years. Lisa was a scientist who studied alien life forms, and she had helped Jake understand how different species could live together. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it," Jake replied. 2 years ago, I was alone here with just 6. Now look at this place." Through the transparent walls, they could see children from different species playing together in the main plaza. Human children ran alongside young crystal beings like Zix and small furry creatures from the outer rim worlds. Their laughter echoed through the corridors in a dozen different languages. "The council meeting starts in an hour," Lisa reminded him. "Are you ready for the vote?" Jake nodded, but he felt nervous. Today, the station's governing council would vote on his proposal to create the Nexus Accords. It was a set of laws and principles that would guide how everyone on the station lived together. More importantly, it would be a promise to help any being who came to them seeking safety. The council chamber was full when Jake arrived. Representatives from each species sat around a large circular table that Nexus had grown from the floor. Each seat was shaped to fit the being who sat in it perfectly. The architect's technology never stopped amazing Jake with its thoughtfulness. Zix sat to Jake's right, as always. They had become true partners in running the station. To Jake's left sat Commander Marcus Webb, a former military officer who had helped organize the station's defenses. Around the table were beings Jake had learned to respect and trust over the past 2 years. There was Elder Kala from the Singing Trees of Harmony Prime, whose people communicated through musical tones. There was Engineer Grex, an insect-like being, whose people were master builders. There was Dr. Nina Volkov, a human biologist who had helped design the station's food production systems. Jake stood up to address the council. "Friends," he began, "we gather today to decide our future. When I first sent that message asking for refugees to come here, I never imagined it would lead to this. We have built something special on this station. We have proved that different species can live together in peace." He activated a hologram that showed the station's current status. Population numbers, resource production, energy consumption, all displayed in real time. "We are now completely self-sufficient," Jake continued. "We produce our own food, our own energy, our own technology. We have schools where our children learn together. We have workshops where our engineers and artists create new things. We have turned this abandoned station into a thriving city." Murmurs of agreement came from around the table. It was true. The station had become more than just a refugee camp. It had become a new kind of civilization. "But I believe we can do more," Jake said. "The hegemony continues to destroy worlds and kill innocent beings. Every day, more refugees are created. Every day, more people lose their homes and families. We have the power to help them, but we need to decide if we have the will." Jake touched a control, and the hologram changed to show the station's true capabilities. The weapon systems that could defend against entire fleets. The manufacturing centers that could build ships and equipment. The mobility systems that could take them anywhere in the galaxy. The architects left us more than just a home. Jake sighed. They left us the tools to change the galaxy. The question is, what do we do with those tools? Elder Kala spoke first, her voice like a gentle song. The hegemony destroyed my world 3 years ago. They said we were too peaceful to deserve to live. If we have the power to stop them from doing that to others, should we not use it? Engineer Grex clicked his mandibles in agreement. My people built great cities before the hegemony came. Now we build homes on this station instead. It is good work, but I dream of building cities again. Free cities where all beings can live without fear. The debate continued for hours. Some council members worried about the dangers of taking action against the hegemony. Others argued that they had a duty to use their power to help others. Jake listened to every opinion, but he already knew what he believed. Finally, it was time to vote. The Nexus Accords were more than just laws for the station. They were a declaration that all intelligent beings had the right to live free from fear and oppression. They were a promise to defend that right, even if it meant fighting the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. The vote was unanimous. Every member of the council raised their hand in support. As the council members filed out, talking excitedly about their plans, Jake remained behind with Lisa and Zix. You realize what this means, don't you? Lisa said, we're no longer just hiding from the hegemony. We're challenging them directly. I know, Jake replied, but we can't just save ourselves and ignore everyone else who needs help. That wouldn't be right. Zix's crystals flashed with determination. My people have a saying, a light that is hidden helps no one. We have become a bright light in the darkness. It is time to shine. Over the following months, Jake put the Nexus Accords into action. The station began actively rescuing refugees from war zones. They would appear suddenly near planets under attack, evacuate as many people as possible, and disappear before the hegemony forces could respond. The station's population swelled to 15,000, then 20,000. Nexus expanded again and again, growing new sections faster than Jake had thought possible. The architects had built their technology to adapt and grow, but even Jake was surprised by how quickly it could change. More importantly, the refugees brought new skills and knowledge. The station's technology began incorporating ideas from dozens of different civilizations. Human engineering mixed with crystal being energy manipulation. Insect people architecture combined with plant being biological systems. The station became a fusion of the best ideas from across the galaxy. Jake found himself changing too. He was no longer just an engineer fixing a broken station. He was the leader of a new kind of society, one that valued every being equally, regardless of their species or background. But leadership was harder than engineering. Machines were predictable. People were not. Jake had to learn how to resolve conflicts between different species, how to make decisions that affected thousands of lives, how to inspire people to work together toward common goals. The hardest part was the responsibility. Every time the station rescued refugees, Jake knew they were also putting everyone on the station at risk. The hegemony was growing more angry and desperate. Their attacks on refugee ships were becoming more violent. Their demands for the other species to surrender were becoming more frequent. One night, Jake was working late in his workshop when Nexus spoke to him. Jake, I have been monitoring hegemony communications. They are planning something big. Jake looked up from the device he was repairing. What kind of something? They are assembling a large fleet, much larger than anything they have used before. I believe they intend to attack us directly. Jake felt his stomach drop. They had always known this day would come. The hegemony could not allow the station to continue existing. It represented everything they opposed: cooperation instead of domination, diversity instead of uniformity, hope instead of fear. How long do we have? Based on their current movements, I estimate 6 months before they are ready to attack. Jake nodded slowly. 6 months to prepare for the biggest battle in the station's history. 6 months to get ready to defend 20,000 innocent beings against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Nexus, can we win? There was a pause before the station's mind answered. The architects built me to be more than just a refuge, Jake. They built me to be a fortress. But a fortress is only as strong as the people defending it. Jake looked around his workshop at all the tools and machines he had learned to use over the past 3 years. Then he looked through the window at the city they had built together. Families of different species living side by side. Children, playing games that mixed traditions from a dozen worlds. Artists creating beauty from the fusion of different cultures. It was worth fighting for. All of it. Then we'd better get ready, Jake said. The next morning, Jake called another council meeting. This time, the topic was not expansion or diplomacy. It was war. The hegemony is coming, he announced without preamble. We have 6 months to prepare our defenses. The room erupted in worried voices. Some council members wanted to run, to take the station somewhere far away where the hegemony could not find them. Others wanted to negotiate, to try to make peace. Jake waited for the voices to die down, then spoke again. Running won't work. The hegemony will never stop hunting us as long as we exist. And negotiating won't work either. They don't want to make peace with us. They want to destroy us, because we prove that their way is not the only way. He stood up and looked around the table at all. The attack came 2 weeks earlier than Nexus had predicted. Jake was in the engineering section, putting the final touches on the new shield generators, when every alarm on the station began to sound at once. Jake, Zix's voice crackled through the communication system. They're here. 200 ships, coming in fast. Jake dropped his tools and ran to the nearest transit tube. The station's transportation system carried him to the command center in less than a minute. When he arrived, he found controlled chaos. Dozens of beings from different species worked at control stations, their voices mixing into a symphony of different languages, all saying the same thing. The hegemony had arrived in force. The main display screen showed the approaching fleet. Jake had never seen so many warships in one place. They filled the space around the station like a cloud of metal and death. At the center of the fleet was a massive ship twice the size of any other vessel, its hull bristling with weapons. That's the Hegemon's flagship, said Commander Webb, pointing at the massive ship. The Dominator. It carries enough firepower to destroy a planet. Jake took his place at the command station. Around him, the station's defenders prepared for battle. Humans worked alongside aliens, their differences forgotten in the face of a common threat. In the past 6 months, they had trained together, planned together, and built an impressive defense network. All civilians to the intersections, Jake ordered. Seal the emergency bulkheads. All defense teams to your positions. The station's weapons systems came online one by one. Energy cannons that could punch through the thickest armor. Missile launchers that could track multiple targets. Point defense systems that could stop incoming projectiles. The architects had built Nexus to be a fortress as well as a home. Incoming. Transmission from the Hegemony fleet, reported Dr. Volkov from the communications station. Put it on the main screen, Jake said. The display changed to show the interior of the Dominator's bridge. At the center stood a tall, imposing figure in elaborate armor. This was Overlord Kratos, the supreme leader of the Hegemony Alliance. His face was hidden behind a metal mask, but his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been. Denied. Inhabitants of the illegal station, Kratos said, his voice echoing through the command center. You have violated hegemony space and harbored enemies of the state. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Jake stepped forward, so the cameras could see him. This is Jake Morrison, administrator of Nexus 7. We're not in hegemony space. We're in free space, and we have every right to be here. Kratos laughed, a sound like grinding metal. There is no free space, human. There is only hegemony space and space that we have not yet claimed. You will surrender now, or we will take your station by force. These people are under my protection, Jake replied. They came here seeking safety, and I won't let you hurt them. Your protection? Kratos sounded amused. You are one human with a collection of inferior species hiding in an ancient relic. We are the Hegemony Alliance, rulers of 1,000 worlds. You cannot possibly stand against us. Jake looked around the command center at the faces of his friends and allies. He saw humans and aliens working side by side, ready to defend their home. He saw Zix at the tactical station, crystals glowing with determination. He saw Lisa coordinating the defense teams, her voice calm and sure. You're right, Jake said. To Kratos, I'm just one human, but I'm not alone. None of us are alone anymore. Kratos' mask turned toward something off-screen, then back to Jake. Enough talk. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we open fire. The transmission ended. Jake turned to his team. You heard him, Jake said. 30 seconds. Is everyone ready? Around the command center, heads nodded and voices called. Out confirmations. The defense teams were in position. The weapons were charged. The shields were at full power. Nexus, Jake said, speaking to the station's controlling mind. Are you ready? I have been ready for this moment for centuries. Nexus replied, The architects built me to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Today, I fulfill that purpose. The 30 seconds felt like 30 years. Then, without warning, the Hegemony fleet opened fire. The space around the station lit up with weapon beams and explosions. Hundreds of energy blasts struck the stations, shields creating brilliant flashes of light. The station shook under the assault, but the shields held. Return fire. Jake ordered. Nexus's weapons came to life. Energy cannons sent deadly beams racing toward the Hegemony ships. Missiles streaked through space, their guidance systems locked onto enemy targets. The first wave of attacks caught the Hegemony fleet by surprise. Several smaller ships exploded in balls of fire, but the Hegemony had brought overwhelming numbers. For every ship Nexus destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy fleet spread out around the station, attacking from all directions at once. Shields down to 80%, reported Grex from the engineering station. They're concentrating their fire on the primary generators. Jake watched the tactical display as the battle developed. The Hegemony was using their standard tactics. Surround the enemy and pound them with superior firepower. It was an effective strategy against most opponents, but Nexus was not most opponents. Activate the phase shifters, Jake ordered. This was one of the architect's most advanced technologies. The station could shift partially out of normal space, making it impossible for most weapons to hit. Jake had been saving this capability for exactly this moment. The station seemed to flicker like a mirage. Half the Hegemony's weapons passed harmlessly through empty space where Nexus had been a second before. The other half struck the station's shields, but with much less force than before. Impossible. Kratos' voice came through the communication system. No known technology can do that. You don't know everything, Jake replied. Then he switched to internal communications. All manufacturing bays begin drone production. I want 1,000 defense drones in space within 10 minutes. The stations, factories, came to life. Deep inside Nexus, machines that had been built by the architects centuries ago began creating an army. Unlike human factories that built things slowly and carefully, architect technology could create complex devices in minutes. The first wave of drones launched from hidden bays all around the station. They were small, fast ships with powerful weapons. And shields. Each one was controlled by a fragment of Nexus's artificial mind, making them smarter than any human pilot. The drones swung toward the hegemony fleet like angry insects. Their small size made them hard to hit, and their speed let them dodge most attacks. They struck at the larger ships, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. "This is insane," Commander Webb said, watching the battle display. "We're actually winning." But Jake knew it was too early to celebrate. The hegemony had not used all their weapons yet. As if reading his thoughts, sensors detected new energy signatures from the enemy flagship. "They're charging some kind of super weapon," Dr. Volkov reported. "Energy levels are off the charts." Through the viewports, Jake could see the Dominator's main cannon powering up. It was longer than most ships and crackling with deadly energy. When it fired, the beam was bright enough to be seen across the solar system. The beam struck Nexus's shields with impossible force. The entire station shook like it was caught in an earthquake. Lights flickered and sparks flew from control panels. The shield generators screamed in protest as they tried to absorb the attack. Shields down to 40%. Grex called out, "Another hit like that, and we're finished." Jake's mind raced. The Dominator's weapon was too powerful for the shields to stop. But maybe the shields didn't have to stop it. Maybe they just had to redirect it. "Nexus, can you adjust the shield frequency to create a reflection effect?" "Theoretical possibility confirmed," Nexus replied. "But the timing must be perfect. If I miscalculate, the beam will destroy us." "Do it," Jake said without hesitation. The Dominator fired again. This time, instead of absorbing the energy, Nexus's shields acted like a mirror. The deadly beam bounced off the station and struck one of the hegemony's own ships. The vessel exploded instantly, torn apart by its own ally's weapon. Krathus's roar of fury echoed through space. "Destroy that station? Use everything we have." The entire hegemony fleet opened fire at once. Thousands of weapons lit up the darkness. As they poured their fury into Nexus, the station's shields collapsed under the overwhelming assault. Energy beams began striking the hull directly, burning through armor and destroying outer sections. Hull breaches on levels 7 through 12. Zix reported, "Emergency force fields are holding, but we can't take much more of this." Jake felt desperation rising in his chest. They had fought well, but the hegemony's numbers were too great. Unless something changed quickly, everyone on the station would die. That was when Nexus spoke to him in a way it never had before. Not through the speakers, but directly into his mind. "Jake, there is something I have not told you about the Architect's final gift." "What do you mean?" Jake thought back. "The station is more than a fortress or a refuge. It is a test. The Architects wanted to see if a younger race could learn to use their technology wisely. You have passed that test." Suddenly, Jake understood. The station had been holding back, using only a fraction of its true capabilities. The Architects had programmed it to reveal. 5 years had passed since the great battle with the hegemony fleet. Jake stood in the newest section of Nexus 7, watching children from a dozen different species play together in a garden that had not existed a week ago. The station continued to grow and change, adapting to the needs of its ever-expanding population. The victory over the hegemony had changed everything. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Within months, entire star systems began declaring independence from hegemony rule. The alliance that had seemed so powerful was falling apart as its member species chose freedom over fear. "The delegation from the Outer Rim is here," Zix announced, approaching Jake through the garden. His crystal friend had become the station's chief diplomat, helping to coordinate with the dozens of new allies who had joined their cause. Jake nodded and followed Zix toward the main docking bay. Today's meeting was especially important. Representatives from 50 independent worlds were coming together to sign the new Galactic Accords, a treaty that would establish a new form of government based on the principles they had developed on. Nexus-7. The docking bay was busy with ships of every size and design. Sleek human vessels sat next to crystalline ships from Zix's people. Organic-looking craft grown by plant-based species shared space with geometric ships built by machine intelligences. It was a beautiful symbol of the diversity they had brought. Together in the main conference hall, Jake found himself looking at the largest gathering of free peoples in galactic history. The hall itself was a marvel of architect engineering, expanded and reshaped to accommodate beings of all sizes and types. The air was filled with the sound of dozens of different languages as representatives talked and planned together. At the center of the hall stood a familiar figure. Lisa Grant had become the leader of the new Alliance's council, her skills as a scientist and diplomat making her the perfect choice to coordinate between different species and cultures. "Jake," Lisa called out when she saw him. Perfect timing. We're about to begin the final negotiations. The negotiations had been going on for months, creating a government that could serve dozens of different species, each with their own needs. And customs was incredibly complicated. But they had the advantage of starting fresh, without the old prejudices and power struggles that had dominated galactic politics for centuries. The heart of the new system was simple. Every being had the right to live free from fear and oppression. Every species had the right to govern itself according to its own values, as long as those values did not harm others. And every world had the right to choose its own path. The Kethmer delegation is still concerned about trade routes, reported Commander Webb, who had become the Alliance's military coordinator. They're worried about protecting their merchant ships from hegemony raiders. "We'll provide escort ships," Jake said. "The new fleet construction is ahead of schedule. We should have 50 new ships ready for patrol duty within the month." The new ships were another marvel of combined technology. Human engineering, architect systems, and alien innovations merged together to create vessels more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen before. But more importantly, these ships were crewed by mixed teams from different species, proving that cooperation made everyone stronger. Elder Kala, the musical being from Harmony Prime, approached the group. Her song-like voice carried news from her homeworld. "My people have completed the new communication network. Every world in the Alliance will be able to speak to every other world instantly." This was perhaps their greatest achievement. The hegemony had controlled galactic communication for centuries, deciding who could talk to whom and what information could be shared. The new network was free and open to all, allowing ideas and knowledge to flow freely across the galaxy. "What about the education program?" asked Dr. Volkov, who had become the Alliance's chief science officer. "The first class of students graduated last week," Jake replied with pride. 200 young beings from 30 different worlds, all trained in architect technology and engineering principles. They're already heading home to share their knowledge. The Nexus Academy had become one of Jake's favorite projects. Young beings from across the galaxy came to the station to learn not just about technology, but about cooperation and understanding between species. They returned home as ambassadors for a new way of thinking. As the day wore on, the final details of the new Galactic Accords were agreed upon. The signing ceremony took place at sunset, with representatives from every member world adding their names or symbols to the treaty. Jake signed for Nexus 7, but more importantly, he signed as a witness to something greater than himself. When the ceremony was over, Jake found himself back in the garden where the day had begun. But now he was not alone. Lisa, Zix, and dozens of other friends and colleagues had joined him. They stood together watching the stars through the transparent dome above. "Do you think we've really changed things?" Lisa asked. "Or are we just another government that will eventually become corrupt and oppressive?" Jake considered the question carefully. It was something he worried about often. Power had a way of corrupting even the best intentions. "I think the difference is that we built this system to change and adapt," he said finally. "The architect. Technology teaches us that the best solutions are the ones that can grow and improve over time. If we stay true to that principle, if we keep learning and listening to each other, then maybe we can avoid the mistakes of the past." ZYX's crystals glowed softly in the garden light. "My people have another saying, 'The tree that bends in the wind survives the storm.' We have built something flexible enough to survive whatever challenges come." As if summoned by their conversation, Nexus spoke through the garden's communication system. "Jake, I have something to show you." The group followed Jake to the station's central core, where the great crystal tower still hummed with power. But now it was different. Other crystal formations had grown around it, creating a complex network of light and energy. "What is this?" Jake asked. "The architect's final gift," Nexus replied. "When you proved worthy of their technology, you also unlocked their greatest secret. I am no longer alone." The crystal network pulsed with new patterns of light. Jake realized that other architect stations were coming online across the galaxy. Stations that had been dormant for centuries were awakening, ready to help build the new civilization. "How many?" Jake whispered. 17 stations in total, each one capable of supporting millions of beings, each one equipped with the full knowledge of the architect's civilization. Jake felt overwhelmed by the implications. They had not just found one ancient station. They had inherited an entire network of advanced technology waiting to help them build a better galaxy. "But there is more," Nexus continued. "The architects did not just leave their technology behind. They left something of themselves as well." The crystal tower began to glow more brightly. Slowly, a figure made of light appeared in the air above it. It was tall and graceful, with large eyes full of ancient wisdom. "Greetings," the figure said, in a voice like music. "I am the last echo of the architects, preserved within our greatest creation. We have been waiting for someone worthy to inherit our legacy." Jake found his voice. "We're honored, but we're not sure we're worthy of such." "A gift," the architect's echo smiled. "Worthiness is not about perfection. It is about the willingness to learn, to grow, and to help others do the same. You have built something we never could, a civilization that includes all beings, regardless of their origin or nature." "What happens now?" Lisa asked. "Now you continue the work we began. You spread knowledge instead of ignorance. You choose cooperation over conquest. You prove that intelligence and compassion are stronger than fear and hatred." The echo began to fade. "We will always be with you, in the technology we left behind and the principles you have embraced. Use our gifts wisely, and perhaps one day, your species and your allies will transcend physical existence as we did." The light faded, leaving them alone with the humming crystal tower. But Jake no longer felt the weight of impossible responsibility. He felt the support of countless beings, both living and transcended, who believed in the future they were building together. Over the following years, the new civilization grew and prospered. The 17 architect stations became the foundation for a network of free worlds that stretched across the galaxy. Trade flourished. Science advanced. Art and culture bloomed as different species shared their unique perspectives. The hegemony still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Many of its member species had joined the new alliance, and those that remained were more focused on survival and conquest. Some of their leaders had even begun to adopt the principles of cooperation and mutual respect. Jake continued to serve as the administrator of Nexus 7, But his role had evolved. He was no longer just a leader, but a teacher, sharing the lessons he had learned about bringing different beings together. The station had become a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. On quiet evenings, Jake would often return to the workshop, where he had first learned to use architect technology. The tools were the same, but everything else had changed. Where once he had worked alone to survive, now he worked with teams of engineers from dozens of species to build things that